I want to talk about the root of critical race theory, which is in an earlier movement dating back to the early part of the 20th century, which was called critical theory. So the critical theory movement was, in a sense, the parent that gave birth to an offspring called critical race theory. If you think about critical race theory, so-called CRT, it was merely the addition of the idea of race to critical theory. That's where the R comes from. And not just an addition, but a sort of a displacement. Critical theory was basically based on class. It sought to interpret, analyze, but also produce a revolutionary outcome based upon class division. So I want to just trace this history because it helps us understand the offspring, critical race theory, a little bit better. Now, Karl Marx, who was, of course, the founder, if you will, of Marxism, and Marx believed that a society was divided between an entrepreneurial class, what he called the capitalists, and a working class that would continue to become poorer and poorer over time. By the way, Marx's view was directly contradicted by Lincoln, who said the opposite. Let me read a quote from Lincoln. Lincoln says, "There is not of necessity any such thing as the free hired laborer being fixed to that condition for life." And then Lincoln points to what's going on around him. He goes, "Many independent men everywhere in these states," meaning in these United States, "a few years back in their lives were hired laborers. The prudent, penniless beginner in the world labors for wages a while, saves a surplus with which to buy tools or land for himself, then labors on his own account another while, and at length hires another new beginner to help him. This is the just and generous and prosperous system which opens the way to all, gives hope to all, and consequent energy and progress and improvement of conditions to all." So Lincoln is actually describing how things actually happen. Marx had no idea. And Marx thought that the laborer would become angrier and angrier and then would foment a revolution based upon the kind of unbridgeable chasm between the two classes. And this never really happened. This created a kind of crisis in Marxism. But there's one part of Marxism that lives on, and that is where Marx said that philosophers, I'm not quoting Marx, have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And so you see here that Marx was not just about analysis, not just about understanding. One of the fallacies that people have today about critical race theory, and in fact the critical race theorists exploit this, "Oh, no, we're just helping people to understand racism. We just want to show them about what happened in American history." No, for Marxism, it was never just about showing or understanding or analyzing. It was about using knowledge as a spur to revolution. It was, as Marx says, the point is to change the world. The point is to change society, to restructure society. So Marx, in this sense, turned Hegel on his head. Hegel was trying to understand what Hegel considered to be the hidden movements of history. Marx said, yeah, we want to understand, but that's not enough. Now, Marx's understanding, as I mentioned, was flawed, in fact, was fatally flawed. And so what happened later was that Marxists in the 20th century, notably the Italian communist Gramsci, said that we need to infiltrate the institutions of society. This was Gramsci. I'm now quoting him. His phrase was the long march through the institutions. His idea was that what the left needs to do is they need to overcome and infiltrate the family and the school and the artistic community and the church and political parties, media outlets, even independent court systems. So this project, you can see, that came out of revolutionary Marxism is very much with us today. The key difference is that it takes critical theory. Critical theory here is the Marxist doctrine that the point of theory is to drive wedges in society, to create and magnify divisions, to spur revolution and remaking of society. And the only innovation that critical theory does with all of this is it infuses the new idea of race. And it's a very cunning infusion. Why? Because with Marx, there was always the problem that the class grievance that he kept talking about wasn't really there. That the working class guy wanted to improve his condition, as Lincoln says, but he didn't really want to go overthrow his boss. He wanted to sort of become the boss. And so Marx was building this idea of division, but building it on a little bit of a sociological fiction. But, says the leftists in America in recent decades, racial grievance is real. It is anchored in history. And so it's actually easier to tap those veins of division. Obama, I think, understood this very well. It's much easier to set people against each other, black against white, and ultimately male against female, straight against gay. You see here the full development beyond race to other forms, so-called intersectionality, multiple forms of oppression, multiple wedges of division. But the point I want to make is that this critical race theory, CRT, has its roots in CT, critical theory. And critical theory is itself an offspring of the failed doctrine of Marxism.